Hello everyone. I welcome you to another lecture on Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. This is for students of English Honours, UG Semester 6. The number of the paper is Core Course 14 and the name of the paper is Postcolonial Literature. We are currently dealing with Unit 2, which contains the work Heart of Darkness written by Joseph Conrad. Let us learn a little bit about who exactly Joseph Conrad was. Joseph Conrad was born in the year 1857 and he died in 1924. His earlier name, before he changed his name to Joseph Conrad, was Joseph Theodore Conrad Korzeniowski, who was born on 3rd December 1857 in a town in Polish Ukraine, which was then controlled by the Russian Tsar. Conrad's father, Apollo Korzeniowski, was a patriotic nobleman who was involved in the struggle to free his homeland from the Russian imperialists. His father was known to be a poet, a translator, as well as a dramatist, and he had a very significant impact on Joseph, with whom he shared very close relations. Sadly, he was arrested and sent along with Conrad's mother to a concentration camp. Conrad found himself orphaned at the young age of 11, since his mother died in prison and his father in the year 1869 due to the hardships of the exile in northern Russia. Conrad became the ward of his maternal uncle for the next 6 years, during which he widely read in French as well as German. In 1874, at the age of 17, he went to France, particularly to the town of Marseille, and he joined the French merchant marine. Now, Conrad chose sea as his vocation for almost the next 20 years. And this is the reason why a lot of his novels and short stories has sea as the background for action. He chooses sea as a background, and the sea acts as a symbolic parallel for the hero's inner turbulences and contradictions. On 18 June 1878, he arrived in England for the first time. And it is interesting to note that when he first came to England, he only had an English vocabulary consisting of about 100 words. In 1886, at 29 years of age, he officially became a British subject and he changed his name to Joseph Conrad, which is a much more British sounding name. He started writing in English, his third language, after Polish and French, and he was able to publish his first short story in English. As a sailor, he has made several voyages to the far eastern lands, and he continued to work as a sailor for many more years to come. His one trip up the Congo River basin in Africa led to the writing of his best shorter novel, or novella as it is described, titled The Heart of Darkness. For his works, he has won critical acclaim, but financial success always eluded him for many years. Both he and his wife, Jessie George, suffered from severe serious illnesses, and as a result, Conrad died of a heart attack in the year 1924. Let us talk a bit about his major works. He published his first novel, titled Almayer's Folly, in the year 1894. Besides novels, he has also written diaries and journals, and his diary entries became the basis of his magnum opus that we just discussed, Heart of Darkness, which was first published as a 3-part series in a magazine called as Blackwood's Magazine in the year 1899. Later on, it was compiled and it was published in an anthology titled Youth, a Narrative and Two Other Stories, which got published in the year 1902. His other significant works are The Nigger of Narcissus, A Tale of the Sea, 1897, Lord Jim, 1900, Nostromo, A Tale of the Seaboard, 1904, The Secret Agent, A Simple Tale, written in 1907, and in 1911 his work Under Western Eyes was published. Coming to the novel that we have at hand, Heart of Darkness. Now, this novella, as discussed earlier, was first published as a three-part series in 1899 in a magazine called as the Blackwoods Magazine. It was later on compiled and it was published in an anthology of which was titled as Youth, a Narrative and Two Other Stories, which got published in the year 1902. The novel Heart of Darkness is partly autobiographical, since it is inspired from the diary entries of Conrad when he had visited the colonized Congo in Africa. It is an impression taken from life. We need to keep this in mind that during the last 2 decades of the 19th century, the European nations were trying to colonize as much of Africa as possible. They tried to justify their action of colonization by calling it the white man's burden. What exactly is the white man's burden? The white man says that they are colonizing these nations because they wanted to civilize the natives, which they considered to be savages. So basically, they put themselves on a pedestal and they considered themselves to be emissaries of light and knowledge and education, which was being spread by their work in these colonies. So they try to justify the act of colonization by calling it the white man's burden, the burden which the white man has to carry in order to bring civilization to the savage natives. But their actions spoke completely otherwise. Their sole interest was wealth gain, and one of the most brutal European colonies was the Belgian Congo, the property of Belgian King Leopold I, and the story revolves around this particular area in Africa. The novel Heart of Darkness comes in the genre of colonial literature, or it can also be called as quest literature. In the genre of colonial literature, the European writers portrayed colonization and imperialism of the Europeans from Africa to the Far East in the 19th and the 20th century. Conrad's novels reside in the transition period of Victorianism, which follows strict conventions, and there is a lot of focus on polite society, and modernism. It is in between that transition period, modernism and age in which the old conventions were replaced by new literary forms. Now, in Heart of Darkness, we find that the narrative of the novel is quite experimental in nature. With regard to time and non chronological narrative, Conrad tried something new. The setting of the story, we find that the narrator tells the story from the ship at the mouth of Thames River in London, England, around the year 1899. Now, the narrator in this particular story is a frame narrator, and we see that a story is being told within a story. This, the introductory or the main narrator, sets the stage for a more emphasized second narrative. The frame narrator, who is anonymous, introduces Marlow to the reader, the narratee. Who is narratee? Narratee is the person inside the text to whom the person is speaking. When Marlow takes over and starts telling his story, the anonymous narrator becomes one of the narratees. Marlowe's story within a story is set in an unnamed European city. It is probably Brussels, and in Belgian Congo, Africa in the early to mid 1890s. We find Conrad to be a trenchant critic of imperialism, and in this work, he uses Marlow as his mouthpiece And Marlow is basically a portrayal of Conrad himself. The work is highly personal and autobiographical, and it has a stamp of authenticity. Due to this autobiographical nature of work, this book acquires a documentary and a historical value as well. It has documented a lot of events that had actually happened in the Belgian Congo Basin in African region during the colonial era. The novel primarily deals with the greed of the colonizers, and it paints a very detailed picture of the exploitation as well as barbarism that was meted out to the black native Africans. It talks about the deterioration of white man's morals when he is let loose from European restraints and established as an emissary of light. The civilized man who wanted to civilize the savages becomes savage himself. The white man out on a mission to civilize the black native savages himself becomes a savage. That is the crux of this whole story. It is a fascinating masterpiece of an unusual kind, and it leaves a deep impact on the mind of the readers as well. This brings us to the close of my first introductory lecture on Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. This lecture will be followed by the plot outline, in which the book is divided into 3 sections 1, 2, and 3, and we are going to take up each section separately. Thank you.